Hello, everybody, and welcome to another CP Online webinar.
So today we're talking about the shadow.
Yeah, exactly. Such an important theme for people who are truly committed to doing inner work.
Yeah. So the shadow is a concept many of you may be familiar with. It comes from Carl Jung's work, and it's a lot about the idea that all light casts a shadow, and the light of our consciousness, what we pay attention to, is one thing, but then there's a part of us that we don't pay attention to, a part of us that's in the dark, a part of us that we unconsciously avoid being. Sometimes it's something we believe is unacceptable or unattractive or makes us somehow unworthy. And it's, of course, something that is really important in psycho-spiritual growth work because, as is communicated through myth and fairy tale and things like that, the Enneagram maps a kind of hero's journey, which necessarily leads through facing your shadow, integrating your shadow, looking at those parts of yourself that you don't want to see. Sometimes in fairy tales, running into the monster, facing the dragon, is a metaphor for the work we all need to do, which is often painful or difficult, of really looking at those parts of ourselves that we habitually avoid as part of being identified with our personality. When we're operating from ego, there are things we tend to focus on that are related to our coping strategy for getting around in the world. And then there are parts of ourselves that we don't see, that are not always aware for us in our consciousness. Anything you want to add, Uranio?
Yeah, so, okay, so this is a very deep theme that could imply going to different levels of inner work. Basically, when we are coming to this world and building ego, we start idealizing ourselves as if we were in touch with more truth and beauty and essence than we actually are. And for all the first half of, not the first half for most people, it's all their lives, but for the half of what is the way back to fully being in essence, that is purging. And purging implies being in touch with shadows for us to overcome our idealizations about ourselves. And doing that is important to regain authenticity and to being in touch with is really there, which in the personality realm has a lot of bad stuff, to be very honest. So if on one hand, we need to develop acceptance of us when we are doing work and not fight too much against ego, on the other hand, we also need to see clearly that ego is not essence and ego is not beautiful, not elevated. And that implies having the courage to looking at shadows. So for most spiritual traditions that I know of, the work on shadows comes only very much later on the work. Like for Gurdjieff, it doesn't happen before you have 10 or 20 years of work. For Sufism, might start a little before that, but not that much. And the concept of these traditions is that when we talk about shadows, we are talking about very deep, hard shadows. But I think that from the point that we come from level of awareness 1 to 2, we already need to start working on some shadows. And it's super important to talk about shadows of type and things that are unconscious. These spiritual traditions think of shadows as being very, very dark things. But we have extended these concept following a bit more of the Jungian concept to adding to those the whole thing of unconscious materials that we have, especially things that we are not too happy with and we avoid seeing in our idealization of ourselves. So today, we are going to talk about much necessary shadows that we need to see, a bit more on level of awareness too. And if you don't know what I'm talking about right now, as a CP Online member, you can come back to webinars that we did about the levels. But just know that there will be shadows that are significantly harder even than the ones we are going to share with you today. And hopefully, as a community, we will get some time in the future to a point that B and I will feel comfortable sharing more about even deeper shadows. But that needs to be done with a lot of care and a lot of caution, because looking at those other shadows is definitely a complete deconstruction of our types. And we need to start with a more humble approach.